So again, welcome everybody to Tips for Adjusting to an Online Schedule with me, Kelly Christensen. So the two big things when you're trying to adjust to a new schedule is trying to figure out that balance of time management and organization. And both of those things go into feeling confident about your online classes. So let's start with a little bit of a breakdown as to what goes into making our time management really effective. So number one, we want to identify our priorities. We want to make our schedule visible. We want to create some sort of action plan, and we want to get organized. And then we want to breathe, right? So this is a really stressful time for all of us. And part of taking care of that stress is allowing yourself some flexibility and some time to kind of work through how everything's going for yourself. So when we're identifying our priorities, that's exceptionally important right now, especially when our priorities might have changed, right? When you were here on campus, it may have been more of a concern to focus really heavily on your classes, but being like back home with your parents, those priorities may have shifted. So the first thing you want to look at is, what are those priorities for yourself? Some of these are classes, study time, meals, work, sleep, breaks. Excuse me. So a lot of times when I work with students, they forget to prioritize meals, sleeping, and breaks, and that's incredibly important right now. So as we go through this really stressful time, it's really important to take care of yourself and include those in your schedule. So when we're building our schedule for ourselves, we want to start first and foremost with things that have set times that we can't change. So you can think of classes and work as examples. Right now, some of you may have Zoom lectures that are required by certain classes, so plugging those in first is really important. And then you want to add in some study times for yourself. So try and keep these between 1 and 1.5 hours so you don't get too burnt out. And then don't forget meals and breaks and other activities. So I'm going to go through kind of building a sample schedule for yourself, and this can be used, like this template can be used, and we'll also look at one that's a little more online specific here in a second. So our class is going first. Maybe some of you still have those consistent class times, and maybe you don't, but plugging in times that you want to spend to work on those classes goes first. If you're still working, you'll want to plug in your work schedule, because again, that's something that's pretty set in stone. And then you want to add in some time for homework and studying. And you can notice that these blocks are just an hour long. And again, that helps prevent some burnout for us. And then I include sleep. So don't forget sleep, especially in this time of stress. Kind of set a bedtime for yourself. I know that sounds a little silly and something you may not have done in a while, but a good sleep schedule is still critical through this time. And then find times to eat. So if you're at home, you might have a more rigid meal structure than you have in the past, just because you're with different people. But if you're still in Moscow, maybe by yourself, remember to feed yourself. So I won't tell you when, how, or what to eat, but you should eat. And then make sure to include breaks. So some of these don't make sense right now, like going to the rec center or having a big friend night, but you can still incorporate them in some way. So rather than going to the rec center, maybe you're doing an at-home workout, or rather than having all of your friends together in one room, you're all meeting over Zoom or FaceTime to still hang out. So incorporate those breaks into your schedule. So that schedule that we looked at first can seem a little overwhelming because every hour of the day is planned out. So if that's a bit stressful for you, like it is for me, you don't have to schedule every hour of the day, right? You can just include as much detail as you need to feel productive and feel like you have some structure. So let's talk about sort of the big thing on everyone's mind is, how do we build that structure, that schedule, when all we have are online classes, and maybe your classes aren't meeting at specific times anymore, and you're kind of just left adrift to figure it out for yourself. So online courses can provide a lot of scheduling freedom, but it's important to give yourself some structure. So the burden of labor is on you. Oh, do you have a question? Maybe?
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Do you have a question? No? Okay. Okay, cool. We'll keep going. So it's important to give yourself some structure. So building your own structure can really help with motivation and keep you on top of work. So I'm teaching a class right now, and one concern that a lot of my students have expressed is that it's really hard to keep track of due dates when they're not in class and getting those reminders pretty regularly. So building those due dates in for yourself is now something that's really critical to do. And when you're building a schedule for online classes, it's really important to be specific with what you're going to do with your time. So something that I fell into doing when I took online classes as an undergrad was just blocking out a time and calling it studying, instead of saying I'm going to look at the lectures at this time and then I'm going to study those problems later. So saying exactly what you plan on doing during that time is really critical. So let's look at maybe building a schedule for an online class. So again, just like before, if your classes require you to attend something at a certain time, put those in first. So maybe you have a Zoom lecture still 3 times a week, like normal for biology. Put that in, right? It's not going to move, it's not going to shift. You're pretty confident on that one. But then you want to schedule time for classes that shifted away from having set times to meet. So maybe one of your instructors has pre-recorded some lectures and they're posting them throughout the week, or they're just posting their slides with notes. You want to block out time for yourself to go back and watch those recorded lectures. Take notes on those posted slides. So putting time in your schedule to do those things can help keep you on track to finishing the material. One common theme that I've seen with some of the students that I've talked with so far is they kind of put off some of those lectures and slides until Sunday night, and then they're rushing to get everything done, and that's a lot of stress on you. So maybe it's not multiple times throughout the week, but even just setting aside, a big 2-hour block one day per lecture is a great place to start. It's all about building these things in slowly and in a way that works best for your life. And just like before, you want to schedule in homework and studying time. So keeping those blocks to an hour and a half or an hour is just as critical now, especially because it's usually a lot more work when you're online to learn the material yourself. So you want to give yourself enough time to get through it, but also not burn out. Now, one of the things that you can notice on this schedule is that I left a ton of free space. Part of that is because I didn't include like a work schedule and meals, but the other part of that is that when you have online classes, it's really important to build in time for flexibility. So especially right now, a lot of things are popping up unexpectedly in your life, and you want to make sure that you have a schedule that allows for those interruptions and doesn't throw off your entire day. So you want this balance between some structure for yourself and flexibility for yourself. So a couple other tips for online scheduling are to make a master list of due dates and deadlines, to utilize your phone and computer for reminders. So as I mentioned before, I've heard a lot of students talk about forgetting due dates. So it's one thing to write those down on a piece of paper for yourself, but it's also really important to remind yourself of them, right? So calendars can get lost if it's just a piece of paper, but utilizing Outlook or Google or just your Apple Calendar, anything like that, to send you a reminder a couple days before something's due and then the day that it's due is really critical in this time. And then incorporate some tutoring and SI Pass to add some more structure to that study time in your schedule. This is great for a couple of reasons. One, it reminds you to go and do that studying, and it provides you with a place to ask questions, to get some help. And then two, it also allows you to still connect with the campus community in some way, shape, or form. So this is a really isolating time for people. A lot of folks have expressed feeling really lonely, And that's all incredibly valid, but very hard to deal with. So incorporating some of these resources is a good way to reach out and connect with your classmates still, and share that sort of community of learning in a safe way. Really quick, do we have any questions about any of the material yet? I'll give a second. Okay. I'm not hearing anything from Corinne, so we'll keep going. So you want to make your schedule visible. That was one of the other points that I mentioned at the beginning. And it's important to find the method that works best for you. But it is critical to make that schedule something that you're seeing often. So actually recording what you need to do can help motivate you to get it done. Oh, we have a question. Oh, yay. Okay, Corinne. Thank you.
Sorry, Kelly, just me.
Oh, no, you're good. You're good. It's fun. I enjoy it. Okay. So yeah, actually recording what you need to get done can help motivate you to do it. So it's a fun brain trick, right? When you write something down, it helps you commit to doing it later or doing it now. So actually going through and writing down, like, I'm going to study for 1 hour for my Math 143 class, or I'm going to make flashcards for an hour for anthropology. I'm going to review key terms in political science. I'm going to review famous artists for Art 101. Like, any of those really specific tasks written down will help you commit to doing them. And you can use your paper planner or your phone or any organizational app that you are interested in. And if you'd like to talk about sort of how to actually build one of those schedules for yourself, please let me know. You can stick around after this presentation and we can kind of go through some of that and really tailor it to you. So one of the things that I've been talking a lot about with students is creating action plans in a really intentional way. And this helps give you some direction, especially when things don't have a lot of direction at the current time. So I'm sure you've heard coaches talk about action plans a lot, but as a quick reminder, it's a way of taking a large task and breaking it up into smaller, more manageable pieces. And you can action plan big projects, homework assignments, study sessions, anything else. I action plan my day a lot of the time. And when you're making your action plan, it's important to include intermediate deadlines. So when you want to get certain things done. And these deadlines can really help prevent procrastination. So when you're home, it might be like, oh, I can get to that later because I've got a lot of time in my schedule, which is true. But if you continue to put something else off, it's just going to add to some stress. So giving yourself some of those deadlines can really help with that. So we're going to go through a couple different types of action plans and kind of get a feel for how those can look. So first is action planning your study plan. So this might be really useful if a course that you're in right now requires a lot of self-teaching, maybe due to the material type or how the online course is currently set up. So you can develop a study plan for a class that you have right now. So my example is for a biology class. I said I'm going to study chapter 6 of biology, and I gave myself the deadline of April 10th. So then I took that large task and I broke it up into smaller pieces that are a lot more manageable. So I said on the 6th, I'm just going to skim the chapter in the textbook, and then I'm going to attend my Zoom lectures on the 6th, 8th, and 10th, just like those are scheduled. And I'm going to remind myself to take some detailed notes. And then on the 7th, I'm going to write down all of my important terms and concepts on one page. So anything in my textbook that was highlighted, I'm going to write that down. And then on the 9th, I'm going to try out some practice problems. And on the 10th, I'm going to write 2 to 3 sentence summaries for each section of my notes. And this is a really great way to keep up with that schoolwork, especially when maybe some of this is already built in your life when you're on campus, but now you don't have that same structure. So whether that's like, this might be something you would have done during a study table or for part of your living community, now you have to kind of build that for yourself, and this is one way to do it. So we can talk about action planning a paper or a project, right? So let's say you have an English paper due on the 17th. What are sort of the steps that go into getting that done? You might find some resources first, then develop your thesis statement, and then write an extended outline for yourself. So this next little bit about having word count goals is really nice, but I do want to make a note that you can break down these word count goals into whatever size is most comfortable and doable for yourself. So whenever I'm writing a big paper, which is not something I necessarily enjoy, I set really small goals for myself. I say, I'm going to write 100 words, in one study session, and then I'm going to try and write 100 more. And if I go over that goal, that's awesome. But 100 is a really doable goal for myself. So you can break it down into whatever size of step that you want or that you need in order to be productive. No size of step is too small. And then I said I'm going to submit a rough draft to the Writing Center. So I do want to let everybody know that the Writing Center is still open for business for all of you. So they have all of their services online. You can either meet with a tutor in a Zoom session, or you can submit your paper and get it back later with some feedback. So if your schedule doesn't allow for Zoom meetings, or if you don't have that capability at a certain time, that's a really good option to submit and get edits later. And then for this, I said I'm going to edit and review it and then submit the paper by the due date. So this schedule has some flexibility. It has a little bit more detail than maybe what I would normally do when I'm writing a paper, right? So setting an actual number count of your words written is a really good way to keep yourself accountable versus I'm going to write for an hour, right? That's a great goal, but it doesn't give you a lot of structure to work towards. So finally, we're going to talk about action planning your day. And this is probably the most critical thing to do right now when our days don't have a ton of structure and we can kind of feel a little bit adrift. So you can think of this as a really structured to-do list. And it's just breaking up what you would normally do, but giving it some time limits, some goals, some tasks that you want to complete. So my plan for the 6th, when I get started at 8 a.m. to 9 a.m., I'm going to check my email and respond. So a note with that, right now, I'm sure your inbox is full of emails because that's the easiest way for folks to communicate with the broader campus community right now. And it can be really overwhelming to see, an inbox of like 36 when you wake up that morning. So setting aside some dedicated time to go through those emails, to respond to the ones that need to be responded to, and then just categorize the other ones is really critical. I only put one block of time in this day, but realistically, it'd be good to do it at least 2 or 3 times a day. Given my job, I have my email up all the time, but that's not always possible for folks. So being really mindful and intentional about checking those emails and making sure you're getting all of the communication that you can from your instructors is really important right now. So the next thing I have is attending a Zoom lecture for econ, which maybe you've already got it in your memory that that's going to be a thing, but writing it down is still really beneficial. Then I set the goal to take a half hour to summarize my notes after the lecture, and then I scheduled in a break. And I didn't really set a time limit for that. I just said, I'm going to take a break for myself at this time. And then I'm going to take notes on slides for the recorded lectures for my Phlegm class. I'm going to take another break because that might take me a while. And then I'm going to work on homework from 3 to 5 p.m. And then I'm going to call it a day. So building that structure in is a really great thing to do day to day. These plans can also include meetings that you have. So you might want to go back to your kind of like master list of meetings and due dates and check them each day to see if there's something coming up that you want to work on. Okay. So I just want to check in really quick. I've got the chat up. Is everyone feeling okay about this? If you can type me a quick like, yes, it makes sense, or could you tell me more about something else? That would be great. Any questions? This also gives me a time. Thank you. Woo. I'm glad you like it. That's nice. Awesome. Well, thank you all for submitting those quick little notes. We'll keep going. And just as a reminder, if you have any questions, type them into the chat. Corinne will stop me and I can answer whatever you have up. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is the Pomodoro technique, which you may have heard about before if you've attended a coaching presentation. It's our favorite thing, but it's time management for the small scale. So right now, one of the biggest concerns is also motivation to get things done. So maybe you have a really great schedule and you've set out these blocks of time that you're going to study and you're all prepared like that, but how do you get started? How do you get yourself in the mindset to keep going? And one thing is to break it down a little bit more. So just like an action plan, breaking things down to smaller steps is really helpful. So maybe you sit down and you have that 2-hour block to study, but it seems really intimidating because what am I going to do for 2 hours? So what you can start doing is just do something for 25 minutes, right? So that's what the Pomodoro technique is all about. So for every 25 minutes of intense focus, you give yourself a 5-minute break. And it can be a lot more doable to work for 25 minutes versus 2 hours. But if you do enough of these 25-minute chunks, you still get 2 hours of studying in, but it's a lot kinder to yourself. And I think that's really important right now. So for each 25-minute session, you take a 5-minute break. And then after 4 of those back and forths, you take a longer break, so a 30-minute break. And this can really help maintain productivity and motivation as you go through your studies. So the other part of kind of giving yourself some structure and being successful in online classes is getting organized. And you want to find a good space to work. So you want to create a workspace that is both physically and digitally efficient. Having a dedicated space for working on schoolwork can help add some consistency to your day-to-day online schedule. And then you want to establish an organization system for yourself. And this includes things like clear and consistent file names and arranging files and papers in a way that makes sense. This is really critical when everything that we're turning in now is online. So before you might have been submitting paper copies of certain things and you didn't have to really worry about keeping all of your files organized beyond just you knowing which one to click. But right now it's really critical to have a system that is easy to navigate and is professional when you submit a lot of stuff online. So how do you set up your space to work, right? The first thing is to keep things like notebooks, writing utensils, headphones, charging cords, anything that you'll need nearby. And then try to avoid working in your bed when possible. Now I realize that that isn't feasible for everyone, right? It can be really difficult if you're back at your parents' place or back at a family member's place where it's really crowded and maybe you don't have a spot to set up that's private and just for you. But there are ways to kind of work around it. So if you have to work in your bedroom and the only place to sit is your bed, sit at the end of the bed instead of the front of your bed. Change it up so that where you sleep is a little bit different from where you're working. And then try and minimize distractions when working through lecture materials or doing your homework. And again, I realize that this isn't completely possible depending on where you're at. So try and utilize things like headphones or just some background music to kind of block out the noise and other distractions that may be around you. So I talked a little bit about file organization and how useful it is to take some time to just organize your files that you have. And this is an example of one way to do it. So if you're in an English class right now, you've probably got papers coming up or reading assignments or essays or discussion responses. So creating a way that moves from what class you're in to what type of thing to rough drafts and final drafts and then to your final essay is really important. And I want to take 1 second and notice the file names. So professional communication and professional sort of online presence is really critical right now. So making sure that your file names are clear and professional is something that can be useful when you're submitting everything online. So I am definitely the person who will name something boring essay, final draft, for real final draft. but turning that in isn't necessarily the best thing. So now I try and name everything in a way that's very consistent. So Christensen underscore essay 1, maybe a final on the end, is something that's a lot more presentable to submit to an instructor. And it also tells me what that file actually is, where boring essay, final, doesn't really tell me much about it. So I would try organizing your files as best you can to make it easier for yourself in the long run. So we've talked about sort of how to do all of this stuff, but right now we've had a lot of things pop up into our lives. So how do we actually handle those interruptions and those difficult things that pop up as we go? So there are some things to keep in mind when we're talking about time management and organization and flexibility. So number one is that priorities change. I mentioned this before, but that's a big thing right now, right? Your priority might be more aligned with taking care of your family and your friends and your loved ones, and that's okay. Just make sure to communicate that your priorities have changed. A lot of people are in the same boat as you, so if you reach out and just let someone know, like, hey, is there some way that I can adjust my due date because right now I'm really worried about a loved one, they're probably going to be pretty understanding. So keeping that communication open about your priorities is really critical. Remember that life happens. Now is a good example. You may be experiencing some things at home where maybe the internet goes down, or you're unable to complete something because a different need popped up. That's okay. Again, communicate those things that are happening and grant yourself some flexibility to move around some other items. So when we're thinking about that schedule that I built, there was a lot of open space. And part of that is because life happens, right? Maybe I need to go to the store to get something for someone and I'm the only one who can do it because I'm younger and able to. So remember those things. And then keep in mind that a good plan can always be improved and can always change. So maybe you are the master at scheduling and organizing, and I am very jealous, and that's awesome. But keep in mind that stuff is going to get thrown at you, and things are going to have to adapt, and your plan can always be changed and improved in some way. So don't, or try not to, hold that plan as like a concrete thing that'll never shift. It probably will. Things don't always go according to plan, right? So those kind of tie into the next two of you might have extra time or you might have less time. So let's say you scheduled out 2 hours to work on a paper, but you got done after an hour. What do you do with that extra time? You know, maybe you give yourself a break because trust me, you deserve it. Or maybe you want to get started on your next assignment a little bit earlier so you aren't stressed about it. But maybe you have less time. Maybe that paper ended up taking 3 hours and it kind of bled into the time that you had reserved for working on a different assignment. How do you change up your schedule to accommodate that? And realizing that like you might have to breathe, you might have to shift around things, and you're most likely going to need to reach out to your instructors and the people in your support network who can help you kind of adapt those time changes. And then keep in mind that other people might need your help. So maybe a family member needs it, maybe a friend does, another classmate. Things are going to change up that way. So I want to talk about a few other things that have come up with student conversations that I've had and things that Corinne have said have been really big concerns for folks. And one of those is trying to communicate to your family that even though you might be back at home, you still have a lot of work to do. And explaining your situation and needs to your friends and family can be really difficult. I know that my dad doesn't really get that he can't call me now in the middle of the day because even though I'm technically available for a phone call, I'm still working, and that's still the priority that I have from 8 to 5. So one of the things that's helped is to share my schedule with him. I share my schedule with my partner so that he understands that, like, yes, I'm here, but I still have to meet with folks. I still have meetings. I still have things going on that are really important. So if you're struggling to communicate this information with your family, or maybe they just aren't understanding it as well, try sharing your schedule with them. Build one out that really shows how much work you have every day, and that might help. One other way that you can do this is explaining it like a job, right? A lot of parents understand that, if you have a job, that's a commitment that you have all day. So saying, hey, this is kind of like a 9 to 5 job for me. I still need to get it all done. Yes, I'm on my computer, but it's because I'm getting schoolwork done. That can be really beneficial as well. And then set boundaries with yourself and others. And whether this is blocking out time, writing a clear note on your door to roommates or family members saying, like, in a Zoom meeting, getting tutoring, working on this assignment, setting those really clear boundaries for other people and for yourself can help with getting assignments still done, giving yourself some grace to take a moment to kind of breathe and set that space for yourself. Um, Another thing is to really, really communicate with your instructors often, especially now. So before, it might have been simple to get questions answered in class, either by asking them yourself or because another classmate asked them, but that avenue for asking questions isn't necessarily as easy to access right now. So reaching out via email or a phone call or Zoom whenever you have questions is really critical, in order for you to get that full experience of your course and to feel a little less stressed about it. I know a lot of instructors are kind of floundering to figure out how to get everything online, but you should still reach out to them and let them know if something isn't clear, if something isn't working. They'll need to know that because chances are someone else is having the same struggle. So if you reach out, that might help a lot of people. And then really important is to find ways to connect with friends from a distance. So this is a really isolating time. For those of you who are still in Moscow or are in a situation where you're living by yourself or maybe with one other person, it can be really lonely. And I feel ya. I'm living alone. I don't have another person to hang out with where I'm not going to work. I don't see my coworkers or my friends. So it's really important to stay connected in some way, shape, or form. So having group messages, FaceTiming folks, finding an online game, those are all really great options to stay connected with people. And being intentional about that is really useful. So putting those times in your schedule, getting everybody together and saying, okay, we're going to FaceTime at this time, everyone be there, it's going to be great. I've been doing cooking with friends where we'll both FaceTime and make meals together and eat together in some way, shape, or form. And I think that's really important and a fun way to do it. So the last thing that I want to leave you with as far as this presentation is to remember to breathe. So it's really stressful, and everything that you're feeling is incredibly valid and incredibly difficult. So whenever you're feeling a bit overwhelmed with the situation, take a moment for yourself to breathe through it, and then kind of reassess where you're at. So check in with yourself, check in with your friends, check in with your support system, and make sure that you have the things that you need in order to be successful, in order to feel good about the whole situation. Because I know that it's difficult, but there are a lot of people here to support you. So please, please, please reach out to Corinne or to myself or the other academic coaches, anybody in tutoring and college success. We're all here for you. The Counseling and Testing Center, all of those different places on campus are still available for you to get some help. So that was all I had for my presentation. It feels a little weird to not have super interactive activities, but it's a little bit difficult to do over Zoom. So I want to check in with everybody. Feel free to unmute yourself or to use the chat. How are we doing? Are we feeling good? Was everything clear? Maybe. Awesome. Does anyone have questions about some of the services on campus, how to access them, how you can still utilize those things, or other questions that are just like, hey, how do I deal with this thing given this whole circumstance? And I guess, Corinne, are there any things that you may have that may have come to mind that I could give some clarity on?
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. And again, I'm just going to put out there for everyone, please, now is the time to ask questions if you have any. I know it's towards the end of the day, and I imagine y'all are tired, and we appreciate you attending. And also we appreciate Kelly, so please, you all are welcome at any time to turn on your microphones and your video. Please feel free to interject. But also, if you're kind of not, maybe you're in your pajamas already, you're kind of tucked in for the night. So the chat function is a great way to communicate. But please, if everyone could just also give a shout out to Kelly and a thank you as well, because we're really fortunate to have her present to us this evening. And I do see a question in the chat here. So I see one that says, I'm starting to fall behind in classwork. What would you recommend me doing to get caught up?
Yeah, that's a really good one. So I think first is reach out to your instructor and let them know that, one, you're still in the course and you're still ready to get stuff done and you have that desire to still work through the material. So reaching out first would be really good. Second is take an assessment of what work you need to get done. So go through the syllabus or BB Learn and make a list of everything that you need to accomplish for that class to get caught up, and then start to kind of look at, okay, what things can I check off really quickly right away and get those done? And then for some of those big ones, communicating with the instructor about, hey, I had this paper and I've got about half of it done. The due date's tomorrow. Can you extend that due date by 3 days for me so that I can get it finished? I really want to do well in this class. Being open and honest about that, I think, is really critical right now. And I know that a lot of professors are being flexible in their schedules because they realize that students are, like trying to quickly adjust or move or get into all of these online classes still. So that's what I would do. Kind of assessing that material is really useful for yourself, because most of the time you'll see that, like, okay, there are a couple of these little assignments that I can check off, and that, one, really helps with motivation, and two, signals to the instructor that, like, yes, you are still dedicated to this course. Does that help answer? Do you want me to go into some more specifics? Oh, thank you. Yay. Okay. And if you'd like to kind of like schedule a meeting to make that list, please let me know. Sometimes it's really hard to make those giant lists on your own because it's just super overwhelming. So that's what a coach can help you with, is we can sit down and type for you as you let me know what's up. Any other questions, concerns? I do want to give one other bit of advice. If you're struggling at all to contact your instructor, it's really important to let either the dean of students or the department know. I know that most departments are being really, really mindful about that, and they're really trying to make sure that instructors and students are able to communicate well. So if you have any concerns like that, where maybe your questions aren't getting answered as easily, reach out to someone in the department, your advisor, or the dean of students, and they can help you figure out how to get that interaction that you need. You can also reach out to myself. I'm sure Corinne would be happy to help with that sort of thing as well. Sometimes crafting those emails can be a little scary. So if you need any advice on how to do that, like, more than happy to help.
And I have one quick question, Kelly. So one thing, and again, please, y'all send your questions in. One thing I've been hearing from students is, wanting to take breaks, but having a hard time coming back from the break, or like maybe becoming unfocused as they work. Or one thing I hear a lot is when I ask like, well, what do you need? The answer is often like, well, I just need self-discipline. Like I need to kind of, just put the work in. Do you have any advice for like staying focused, keeping kind of like keeping promises to yourself about the work you're going to get done, but also of course being mindful of what you said, like life happening, and also kind of giving yourself the grace to not always follow a schedule?
Yeah. So I think one thing that's really helpful as when it comes to like breaks going on for a little too long, so maybe your plan is to break for 30 minutes and it turns into an hour, set a timer. I do this for myself a lot because I'm totally guilty of being like, oh, I'm just gonna take a 20-minute break, and then I'm like 3 episodes into a show in a rabbit hole and I like haven't accomplished what I need to accomplish. So setting a timer to give yourself some structure is really critical. Um, and the other thing is setting sort of rewards for yourself is one way to create that discipline. So saying, I'm going to take a break after I write 100 words, or I'm going to take a break after I work for 25 minutes consistently. Those sorts of things are good motivators to help keep like your energy up through a study session, without being too hard on yourself, because what it does is reinforce that thing of like, look, I was productive and now I get to be unproductive for a bit. But then also realizing that the amount of breaks that you need is going to change in this situation. So in chatting with the CTC and other counselors in Moscow, it's really important to keep in mind that like this is a really traumatic event that's occurring, and you might not have the same amount of energy that you did beforehand. So that Pomodoro technique and action planning and breaking things into really small steps is a way to grant yourself some grace while still creating that discipline and structure that you feel like you need to get stuff done. Yeah. Did that answer that, Corinne?
Yeah, I think that was great. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, are there any other questions that folks have? You can type them. You can also send a message to me privately, so you can select who you want that message to go to, and I can answer in nice, vague terms to the whole group. Or if you're just like, hey, I have a bunch of questions and I'd like to schedule a meeting with you, let me type my email address. You go, you. And you can send me your questions there. Like maybe it's just a short one that you want to get some assistance on, or you can work with me to schedule a time to meet. I do realize that sometimes asking questions to a group about like a stressful topic is really intimidating. So I totally understand if that's the case for you. But I do want you to know that I'm here, and so is the whole coaching team. And so is Corinne, and all of the OMA folks are all ready to help. Yay. Okay, so I got a question about the pass-fail grading system for struggling in a class. So hopefully at this point you've gotten the email about them extending the deadline to take a pass-fail versus the letter grade. And that is a really good option for a lot of folks if you're really concerned about a class. But there are a couple of things that you want to keep in mind. One is if you have a GPA requirement for graduation or a program or anything like that, taking the pass-fail option, if you pass, it doesn't change your GPA at all. If you fail, it would affect your GPA. So if you were hoping to kind of get a higher grade, so like an A or B in classes to get your GPA up, then that would be something that you wouldn't get if you switch to pass-fail. The other thing to think about is if you're interested in graduate school or some other like graduate degree program, law school, med school, anything like that, some of those programs do require like having a letter grade versus a pass-fail option. So being mindful of those restrictions would be really important as well. For any class that you are considering switching to Passfail, reach out to your advisor and let them know, because they're going to have a better idea as well about any sort of graduation requirements or grad school requirements. Yeah. Did that answer your question? You can send me another email privately or another message privately about that, or if you have like a follow-up. Awesome. Okay. Yeah, it is like we've had some students in INTR who have asked about that option. And it's something that, like, if it's going to be a benefit in your life, then I definitely think take advantage of that. It also isn't an all or nothing thing, so you don't have to switch all of your courses to pass fail. You can just switch some of them. So maybe you're feeling really confident about several classes and you feel like you can still pull out the grade that you would like. Keep those as your letter grade courses, and maybe you have one that you're really on the fence about. It's okay to switch one or two of them. Are there any other questions? Again, you can send them to me privately as well, or you can send them to Corinne privately and she can ask them nice and vague for me. So yeah. Okay, getting some nice silence. Corinne, can you think of any other ones that might have popped up?
I don't think so off the top of my head. I think you've covered, so many of the questions and concerns that a lot of our students have expressed. Yeah, any last minute questions? Any other maybe comments from y'all?
I want to say too that Vandal Health Ed is doing a really great series on sort of how to cope and how to work through some of the heavier, like, mental health and interpersonal health concerns that are popping up with this. So you can follow them on their social media or get connected with their email list. And they have a lot of really amazing resources that they're putting together as quickly as possible. And it sounds like they're going to work with this whole group as well with some presentations. So I highly recommend attending those if you can. I've got Amanda working with my course, and it looks really great, and it's going to be a really big benefit to a lot of folks. So definitely check out some of their stuff. They have a lot of great daily tips on their Instagram, so I would check them out as well. Yeah, I guess I'll hang out a little bit longer too, in case anyone wants to think about one. I'll hang out till like 6:35, just to let folks kind of ask questions if they have them. If you want to connect like face-to-face over Zoom, totally happy to do that too. Yeah, I don't know, Corinne, do you have any other things that you want to mention to folks?
No, I think that's all for me. Yeah, thank you all for coming. Do know again that this will be provided in the form of a video, so it was recorded, so you can have more time with some of the slides that Kelly went over. If you did go back and watch the video and had questions or wanted to make an appointment, just know that those services are available to you. So I'll be sending that out as an email either tomorrow or, of course, early next week. But no, otherwise, I think that's all for me.
Awesome. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it.